Welcome in to the Rock Talk Studio, where I find you that next great rock and roll book or documentary to check out. This is the podcast that reviews, previews, and most importantly, recommends to you the good stuff. I'm your host, Big Rick. Let's plug in. And today, the spotlight falls on the book Loud and Clear, The Grateful Dead's Wall of Sound and the Quest for Audio Perfection. It was written by Brian Anderson. What is the most famous piece of rock and roll memorabilia? If you could bid on anything that's out there, any memorabilia that goes up for auction, what would you bid on? And I thought about this, and I think I would definitely go with Dylan's guitar from the Newport Jazz Festival when he came out and played electric, or maybe the jacket he's wearing. But again, I'm a big Dylan freak. Now, most of us probably can't afford to bid on those crazy pieces they get from some of this iconic stuff. So how did the author of this book, how did Brian Anderson end up with a piece of the Grateful Dead's iconic sound system known as the Wall of Sound? And that's how this book starts, as he acquires a piece of the Wall of Sound and he has it shipped to his parents' house so they can open up together because his parents were involved. They kind of came in and out of the Grateful Dead's world here and there, but it was a really cool beginning to the book and a really cool, great way to start talking about the Wall of Sound. The Grateful Dead at that time, late 60s, had a volume problem, and not in the turn it down sense, but in how can we turn it up louder than most and make it sound right? And almost from the start of their career, they started chasing something that few other bands really were ever looking at this deeply, and that is clarity and loud. And this book makes a really good point of this. Very loud. They were really into very loud music. And how could they make this music sound the way they wanted to sound and to reach an audience and affect the audience the way it affected them? Anderson's book, Loud and Clear, explores the creation of the Grateful Dead's legendary Wall of Sound and the enormous and ambitious live sound that was crafted in the early 70s. The book draws on firsthand accounts, and there's hundreds of them. You've got band members contributing, roadies, audio engineers, deadheads, and even Anderson's parents, as I mentioned earlier. They all come together and create this book, and it's all about the Wall's rise and its central role in the Dead's quest to transform the concert experience all the way up until 1974. The book focused a lot of time on pointing out how crazy obsessed the Dead were in the early days of the band with their sound. They were always trying to figure out how to get a better live sound and how they could do it themselves, because at that time, no one was really doing anything like this. In the late 60s, live rock sound was kind of borderline prehistoric. PA systems were an afterthought, and the Dead was having a real hard time with the muddy mess of distortion that they were dealing with. And as the crowds grew larger, they were challenged by how could they create a live system to satisfy the live sound that they wanted. And then along came Bear. If you're a Deadhead, you already know the name Owsley Stanley, known as Bear, a sonic chemist, both literally and figuratively. He was probably known more widely as a LSD maestro of the kind of Haight-Ashbury scene, but Bear was also a mad genius when it came to the studio. And the Dead may have sounded like a well-oiled machine, but behind the curtain, there was a constant battle between musician ambition and technology limitations, and the Bear waged this war obsessively. Crazy part in the book. I really like this. It was a good example of the depth of this story and how much it went into talking about the Wall. And they looked at where the Dead got their wood for the cabinets, and it was this rugged birch tree from Finland that they picked up that would give them a better control of the speaker's output. It was chosen mainly for its tone, but also that it was extremely durable when they took it on the road. The Wall was 60 feet wide, and it was made up of nearly 600 speakers and stood over 3 stories tall. The custom staging and scaffolding measured 76 feet wide by 30 feet deep at the indoor venues, and then 100 feet wide by 40 feet deep in the outdoor venues, and it weighed 75 tons. The road crew could have the system up and running in about 4 hours. The bottom half of the wall allowed the players to hear themselves on stage, while the upper part projected the sound out into the crowd. As Phil Lesh recalls in the book, it's easy to forget that many of the tools we take for granted today in electric music didn't exist in 1969. Back then, they occasionally had to be cobbled together on the spot. And it's crazy, as pointed out in the book, some of the fundamental ideas behind the wall led to noise-canceling headphones, assistive hearing devices, even iPods. There's a lot of Grateful Dead books out there, and Bear Housley is a pretty famous character in the many unique characters that were floating in and out of the Dead's atmosphere throughout their career. So most Dead fans probably know this story. This book really dives into Housley and expands on that story and does a good job at documenting how Housley was the one who really started the early blueprints for the famous Wall of Sound. The book takes you on tour with the Grateful Dead here. It talks about going to the shows, transporting all the equipment, setting up the equipment, dialing it in, which was a huge, huge issue most of the time. So a lot of it is about the logistics of how they made this happen and what it took Bear and those who followed after him eventually to build this wall. As you can probably tell by now, the book is heavy on the audio side of things. I would say it's very heavy, and at sometimes it was a little too much for me. There is still so much great history here, though, about the Wall of Sound that really hasn't been approached before. I love the angle of exploring how this sound system came together and how the Dead chased it. Just a caution, though, the gear talk can get a little overwhelming. For a brief moment in the mid-70s, the Dead achieved something no other band had. They had a live system that was so pure, so clean, so overwhelming in scope and intention that it made the rest of the industry look like it was just still playing catch-up. It's amazing the amount of money that the Dead shuttled back into this system. They were just really, really concerned about that live sound, which was kind of a cool statement about the Grateful Dead. You will like this book if you're a Deadhead, no doubt about it. Very cool. If you're into audio engineering, technology, and the history of sound in rock and roll, this one's definitely for you. And though it does lean heavy on the audio engineering side of things, it's still a rich narrative that blends sound design, personal reflections, and the spirit of the era, and of course, the everlasting story of all those great Grateful Dead live shows. Loud and Clear, The Grateful Dead's Wall of Sound and the Quest for Audio Perfection runs 360 pages and is written by Brian Anderson. Today's episode is sponsored by the Outlaw Music Festival 10th Anniversary branded merchandise. That's right, all that really cool merch that's being put together to honor those outlaws out in there on that tour. Willie Nelson, of course, Bob Dylan's there, Billy Strings, and Sheryl Crow, to name a few. And here's the cool part, if that's not cool enough. 3 of you are going to be wearing that amazing swag soon because the Outlaw Festival was kind enough to offer the Rock Talk Studio listeners some of this great 10th anniversary merchandise. And all you need to do to win is just send me an email. It's info@rocktalkstudio.com. I'll put that in the show notes. Any Rock Talk Studio Blast subscribers, the newsletter that I put out once a month, you're automatically entered to win. So go check out the Outlaw Music Festival's merch. You can take a look at what you might be wearing. Remember, 3 winners. Gonna drop a link into the show notes also to the Outlaw Music Festival. So again, you can take a look at all the cool stuff, shirts and hoodies and hats that you just might be repping soon. I want to send this podcast out to Ozzy tonight. A couple hours before I recorded this, Ozzy Osbourne passed away, and I'm sure you already know that because I usually do the shows a couple of weeks before, but I just wanted to send this one out to Ozzy. I had a chance to meet him one time. He came in and signed records for a company that I was working with, a record company, and it was just great to be in Ozzy's presence. He's such a character. That's one thing about him. There's nobody like Ozzy before Ozzy And I doubt that there will be anybody like Ozzy going forward. We were just blessed to have him around for so long and to have him go out pretty much playing his own funeral with the Back to Beginnings concert. That was such a triumph. It was such a beautiful show. And it was such a gift from Ozzy, like all the times that he was performing. He loved his audience. It really showed, and he'll definitely be missed. Coming up in next week's show, I'm going to talk about a documentary that is 5 hours long. It took 2 episodes, 2.5 episodes to tell this story. I'm going to talk all about that coming up next week. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Love talking rock and roll with you. Love talking about the Grateful Dead. Such an interesting book, Loud and Clear, talking about that great wall of sound. All right, let's tear it down, pack it up, and head on down the road. I'm going to see you next time in the Rock Talk studio.